The hospital room reeked of antiseptic. What to Sawyer? It smelled like death. He clutched Julian's hand, the beeping monitors slicing through the silence like a blade. At 25, Sawyer wasn't ready to lose the man who'd taught him how to love himself. But the truth was colder than the sterile tiles beneath his feet. Someone had let Julian die. It was 2018, and Syracuse, New York, buzzed with the kind of progressive energy that made Sawyer and Julian believe they could live openly as a couple. Sawyer, a graphic designer with a penchant for sketching cityscapes. Met Julian, a social worker with a laugh that could light up a room, at a local Pride event 2 years prior. Their connection was instant, like two stars colliding in a quiet sky. Julian's warm brown eyes and sharp wit had drawn Sawyer in, and soon, their lives were intertwined, shared coffees at dawn, late-night talks about dreams, and stolen kisses under the willow trees by Onondaga Lake. They were each other's safe harbor in a world that wasn't always kind to men like them. But that night in the hospital, everything unraveled. Julian had been in a car accident, a drunk driver, they said, had swerved into his lane on I-81. The injuries were severe, a fractured skull, internal bleeding, and a heart struggling to keep up. Sawyer had rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital, his heart pounding louder than his footsteps. He found Julian in the ICU, tubes snaking from his body, his face pale but still impossibly beautiful. The doctor, a man in his 50s with a stern jaw and cold eyes, introduced himself as Dr. Richard Hale. Sawyer pleaded for updates, but Hale's responses were clipped, his gaze lingering on Sawyer's hand clasped around Julian's with something like disdain. "He's critical," Hale said, his voice devoid of warmth. "We're doing what we can," but Sawyer noticed the hesitations. The way Hale seemed to prioritize other patients. The way the nurses exchanged uneasy glances when he asked questions. Hours dragged on, and Julian's condition worsened. Sawyer begged for more tests, for a second opinion, but Hale dismissed him, saying, "We know what we're doing." By dawn, Julian's heart stopped. Sawyer's screams echoed through the ward as the flat line pierced his soul. He'd lost his love, his future, and something deeper, a trust in the world's fairness. The weeks that followed were a blur of grief and questions. Sawyer couldn't shake the feeling that Hale had neglected Julian, that his bias against their relationship had tainted his care. He dug into hospital records, spoke to nurses off the record, and uncovered whispers of Hale's reputation, a man known for his rigid beliefs, who'd once refused to treat a transgender patient and made snide remarks about lifestyles he didn't approve of. Sawyer's anger grew, but so did his helplessness. He couldn't prove negligence, not without concrete evidence, and the hospital closed ranks. Julian was gone, and Sawyer was left with nothing but memories and a burning need for justice. He threw himself into work, sketching furiously to keep the pain at bay. His art became darker, sharper, cityscapes now tinged with shadows, faces haunted by loss. He moved to a small apartment in Rochester, trying to escape the ghosts of Syracuse. But Julian's absence followed him. Every night, he dreamed of that hospital room, of Hale's cold stare, of a life they could have had. Sawyer didn't know how to move forward, but he knew he couldn't let go, not of Julian, not of the truth. A year later, a letter arrived. It was from an organ donation agency, informing Sawyer that Julian's heart had saved a life. Julian, ever selfless, had been an organ donor, and his heart now beat in someone else's chest. The recipient's identity was confidential, but the knowledge stirred something in Sawyer. Somewhere out there, a piece of Julian lived on. He clung to that thought, unaware that fate was already weaving a new thread into his story, a thread that would lead him back to the man who'd let Julian die. Sawyer's new life in Rochester was a fragile attempt at starting over, but the past clung to him like damp air after a storm. He worked freelance now, his sketches gracing local galleries, each stroke a silent scream of grief. At 26, he felt older than his years, his blue eyes carrying a weight that made strangers pause. Yet, he kept Julian's memory alive, through his art, through the small rainbow flag pinned to his jacket, through the quiet vow to never let love slip through his fingers again. One crisp autumn day, Sawyer was sketching at a cafe near Lake Ontario when a stranger approached. The man was striking, tall, with chestnut hair and a chiseled jaw, dressed in a tailored black coat that screamed money. He introduced himself as Ethan Caldwell, a 30-year-old lawyer from Buffalo, and said he'd seen Sawyer's work at a gallery. "Your art feels like it's got a story," Ethan said, his voice smooth but curious. Sawyer managed a half-smile, unsure why this man's presence felt both comforting and unsettling. They talked for hours, Ethan's easy charm pulling Sawyer out of his shell. Ethan was openly gay, confident in a way Sawyer envied, and his stories of fighting for underdog clients in court sparked something in Sawyer. Over the next few weeks, they met often, walks along the lake, dinners at cozy bistros, moments where Sawyer felt the stirrings of something he hadn't felt since Julian. Ethan was different, more polished, more guarded, but his touch was warm, and his laugh reminded Sawyer of what it meant to feel alive. But there was something about Ethan that gnawed at Sawyer. His health seemed fragile. He tired quickly, his breath sometimes short. One evening, as they sat on Ethan's balcony overlooking the city, Ethan confessed he'd had a heart transplant 2 years ago. "I was born with a weak heart," he said, his fingers tracing the scar beneath his shirt. "I was on the verge of dying when they found a donor. Changed my life." Sawyer's chest tightened. The timeline matched. He asked, hesitantly, "When the surgery happened?" "October 2018, Ethan replied. Sawyer's world tilted. It couldn't be, but the dates aligned too perfectly. Was Ethan carrying Julian's heart? Sawyer didn't voice his suspicion, but consumed him. He started digging, contacting the organ donation agency, piecing together timelines. The more he learned, the more certain he became. Ethan had received Julian's heart, a cosmic twist that felt both miraculous and cruel. Sawyer didn't know how to feel, drawn to Ethan, yet haunted by the possibility that Julian's heart was the bridge between them. He kept it secret, afraid to shatter the fragile connection they were building. Meanwhile, Sawyer's quest for answers about Julian's death intensified. He tracked down a former nurse from St. Joseph's, Maria, who'd left the hospital after Julian's case. Over coffee, she confirmed Sawyer's fears. Dr. Hale had delayed critical interventions, citing resource allocation, but Maria suspected his prejudice played a role. "He knew you two were together," she said. "I heard him mutter something about not wasting time on people like that." Sawyer's blood boiled, but Maria warned him. Proving malpractice would be nearly impossible without hard evidence. Sawyer's nights grew sleepless, torn between his growing feelings for Ethan and his burning need to confront Hale. Ethan noticed the change, sensing Sawyer's distance. One night, during a heated moment of vulnerability, Sawyer almost told Ethan about Julian, about the heart, but stopped himself. How do you tell someone they're carrying the heart of the man you lost? The man who might have been saved if not for hate. Instead, he kissed Ethan, letting the warmth of the moment drown out the pain, if only for a night. The truth about Ethan's heart was a weight Sawyer carried alone, a secret that both bound him to Ethan and kept him at arm's length. Their relationship deepened, though each moment a mix of joy and quiet torment. Ethan's touch, his laughter, the way he looked at Sawyer with unguarded affection, it was intoxicating. Yet every beat of Ethan's heart reminded Sawyer of Julian. He wondered if he was falling for Ethan or chasing a ghost. By spring 2020, Sawyer and Ethan were inseparable. They spent weekends exploring Rochester's art scene, Ethan cheering Sawyer's gallery openings, Sawyer marveling at Ethan's passion for justice. But Sawyer's obsession with Dr. Hale grew darker. He'd tracked Hale to a private practice in Albany, where the doctor now worked, his reputation untarnished. Sawyer's research uncovered more stories, other patients, mostly queer, who'd felt dismissed or neglected under Hale's care. The pattern was clear, but the evidence remained elusive. One night, Sawyer attended a fundraiser with Ethan, who was speaking about pro bono work for marginalized communities. Ethan's charisma lit up the room, but Sawyer's eyes caught a familiar face in the crowd, Dr. Richard Hale, now grayer but unmistakable. Sawyer's pulse raced, his hands trembling as he gripped his glass. Hale was there, mingling with Albany's elite, his presence a mockery of justice. Sawyer wanted to confront him, to scream, but Ethan's hand on his shoulder grounded him. "You okay?" Ethan whispered, his concern piercing Sawyer's rage. Sawyer lied, saying it was nothing, but the encounter lit a fire. He started shadowing Hale, digging deeper, contacting former colleagues and patients. He learned Hale had a history of bending protocols, of prioritizing certain patients over others. Sawyer's anger became a mission. He'd expose Hale, no matter the cost. But the deeper he went, the more it strained his relationship with Ethan. Ethan sensed Sawyer's distraction, his late-night research sessions, his guarded silences. "Talk to me," Ethan urged one night, his voice soft but firm. Sawyer wanted to, but the truth about Julian's heart felt too heavy to share. A breakthrough came when Sawyer found an old email chain, obtained through a sympathetic hospital admin. It showed Hale delaying Julian's surgery, citing unstable vitals, despite tests indicating urgency. It wasn't proof of malice, but it was a crack in Hale's armor. Sawyer shared it with Maria, who connected him to a lawyer friend, Rachel, who specialized in medical malpractice. Rachel warned that the case was thin, but agreed to help if Sawyer could find more. Sawyer's obsession began to consume him. He pulled away from Ethan, unable to reconcile his feelings with the truth about the heart. One night, Ethan confronted him, hurt flashing in his eyes. "I'm losing you, and I don't even know why," Ethan said. Sawyer's throat tightened, the words about Julian's heart on the tip of his tongue. Instead, he pulled Ethan close, kissing him fiercely, as if he could hold on to both men at once. But the secret was a wall between them, and Sawyer knew it couldn't stand forever. Sawyer's days became a tightrope walk between love and vengeance. Ethan's presence was a balm, but every moment with him was tinged with the ache of Julian's loss. Sawyer's research into Hale intensified, his apartment now a war room of documents, emails, and witness statements. He'd found 2 more former patients willing to testify about Hale's negligence, their stories mirroring Julian's. The case was building, but it was slow, and Sawyer's patience was fraying. Ethan, meanwhile, was planning a future. He talked about moving in together, about trips to Provincetown or San Francisco, about building a life. Sawyer wanted it, God. He wanted it, but the shadow of Julian's death loomed. One evening, as they cooked dinner in Ethan's sleek apartment, Sawyer's phone buzzed with a message from Rachel, a whistleblower, a former surgical resident, was willing to talk. The resident, Dr. Patel, claimed Hale had falsified records to cover delays in Julian's case. It was the break Sawyer needed, but it meant diving deeper into the past, risking everything with Ethan. That night, Sawyer broke. As they lay in bed, Ethan's head on his chest, Sawyer whispered, "There's something I haven't told you." He recounted Julian's story, the accident, Hale's neglect, the heart transplant. Ethan listened, his face unreadable, until Sawyer said, "I think you have his heart." The silence was deafening. Ethan sat up, his hand instinctively touching his chest. "You knew?" he asked, voice trembling. Sawyer nodded, tears falling. Ethan's shock turned to pain. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. Sawyer had no good answer, only guilt. Ethan needed space, and Sawyer gave it, moving back to his own apartment. The distance was agony, but gave Sawyer clarity. He met Dr. Patel, who confirmed Hale's pattern of bias, recalling overhearing Hale dismiss Julian's case as not worth the resources. Patel had kept quiet out of fear, but was ready to testify. Sawyer felt the case solidifying, but without Ethan, victory felt hollow. He missed Ethan's laugh, his steady presence, the way he made Sawyer feel whole again. Weeks later, Ethan reached out. They met at the lake, the same dock where Sawyer once stood with Julian. Ethan's eyes were tired but warm. "I've been thinking," he said. "This heart, it's not just Julian's. It's mine now. And I wanted to beat for you." Sawyer's breath caught. They embraced. The weight of the truth no longer a barrier, but a bridge. Sawyer vowed to fight for justice, not just for Julian, but for the life he could still build with Ethan. The case against Dr. Hale gained traction, but it was a grueling climb. Sawyer, Rachel, and Dr. Patel built a dossier of evidence, emails, witness testimonies, and medical records showing Hale's delays and falsifications. By late 2020, they filed a lawsuit against Hale and the hospital, alleging malpractice and discrimination. The media caught wind, and soon, headlines about a bigoted doctor spread across New York. Sawyer's name stayed out of it, but the attention was a double-edged sword. Hale's supporters painted him as a martyr, while activists rallied behind Sawyer's cause. Ethan stood by Sawyer, their bond stronger for its scars. They moved in together, a small act of defiance against the pain of the past. Ethan attended court hearings, his hand a steady anchor in Sawyer's. But the trial was brutal. Hale's defense team was ruthless, painting Julian as unstable, his injuries untreatable. Sawyer's rage flared, but Ethan's quiet strength kept him grounded. "We're doing this for him," Ethan said, his hand over his heart, Julian's heart. One day, a bombshell dropped, a recording surfaced, leaked by another whistleblower. It captured Hale in a private moment, ranting about abominations and admitting he deprioritized Julian's case. The courtroom erupted. Hale's face drained of color, his defense crumbling. Sawyer felt a surge of triumph, but also a hollow ache. Justice was close, but it wouldn't bring Julian back. Outside the courtroom, Sawyer and Ethan faced protesters, some supporting Hale, others chanting for equality. The tension was suffocating, but Ethan's presence was a lifeline. They talked late into the night, about Julian, about love, about the future. Ethan confessed he felt Julian's heart had chosen Sawyer for him, a cosmic gift. Sawyer cried, not for loss, but for the beauty of what they'd found. As the trial neared its end, Sawyer took the stand. He spoke of Julian's kindness, his courage, the life they dreamed of. He looked at Hale, no longer afraid, and said, "You took him from me, but you can't take his legacy." The words hung heavy, a testament to love's endurance. Ethan squeezed Sawyer's hand, and for the first time, Sawyer felt he could let go, not of Julian, but of the hate that had consumed him. The verdict came on a cold December morning in 2021. Dr. Richard Hale was found liable for malpractice and discrimination, stripped of his medical license, and ordered to pay damages. The hospital settled out of court, promising reforms. Sawyer stood outside the courthouse, snow dusting his coat, Ethan's arm around him. The victory was bittersweet, justice. Yes, but no amount of it could fill the void Julian left. Yet, as Sawyer looked at Ethan, he saw a future worth fighting for. The case sparked change. Hospitals across New York revised anti-discrimination policies, and Sawyer became an advocate, speaking at rallies, his art a platform for healing. He and Ethan grew closer, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that had tried to break them. One evening, by the lake where it all began, Sawyer proposed. Ethan said yes, tears in his eyes, and they kissed under the stars, Julian's heart beating strong between them. Years later, Sawyer stood at a gallery, his latest piece unveiled, a painting of two men by a lake, their hands entwined, a heart glowing where their shadows met. The crowd murmured, moved by its raw emotion. Ethan stood beside him, proud, his hand in Sawyer's. The title read, "A Heart That Lives On." Sawyer had found peace, not in forgetting Julian, but in honoring him through love, through justice, through living. Dr. Hale faded into obscurity, his career ruined, his prejudice exposed. But Sawyer and Ethan thrived. They built a home, adopted a dog, planned a wedding. Julian's heart, now Ethan's, was a bridge between past and present, a reminder that love could survive even the darkest hate. Sawyer no longer dreamed of that hospital room. Instead, he dreamed of tomorrow, of a world where no one would die for who they loved. And in every beat of Ethan's heart, he heard Julian's whisper, live.